They congratulated my wife at her father's funeral before his coffin had even touched the ground. 5 days later, she fired me in front of the very board she believed she commanded. My own son voted to remove me. My wife toasted the victory in my chair with my father-in-law's scotch. She had no idea what was waiting for her on Monday. My name is James Stratton. I'm 47 years old, and I've spent the last 23 years building something I thought would outlive me. Not just a company, a legacy. My father-in-law, Richard Hartley, founded Hartley Medical Systems in 1981. Medical imaging equipment, diagnostic machines, the kind of technology installed in hospitals across 48 states. When I married his daughter Victoria in 2001, I was a systems engineer with a Stanford degree and enough arrogance to believe I could reinvent the industry. Richard saw something in me, told me I reminded him of himself at 30. He wasn't sentimental about much, but he believed in competence, and I was competent. By 2007, when the company needed capital to survive the financial crisis, I didn't just write a check. I rebuilt the entire operation from the inside out. I renegotiated supplier contracts, streamlined production, cut overhead by 38% without laying off a single factory worker. Richard called it magic. I called it math. We stayed afloat while 3 competitors went under. Victoria took credit for supporting the family business. She was technically running the marketing department, which mostly meant signing off on campaigns other people designed and showing up at gallery openings with potential clients. We have 2 kids. Brandon is 22, works in business development at Hartley Medical. His grandfather's idea, not mine. Emily is 19, a sophomore at Northwestern studying journalism. They're both good kids in their own ways. Brandon inherited his mother's gift for reading a room and telling people exactly what they want to hear. Emily inherited my stubborn streak. I didn't realize how crucial that would be until last week. Richard's funeral was on a Thursday, staged like a product launch. Victoria wore Chanel pearls and a carefully curated mask of dignified grief. I'm sure she'd practiced it in the mirror. The service was at Riverside Memorial, the expensive place with the manicured lawns and the little bridge over the koi pond. About 200 people came, board members, investors, physicians who'd bought our equipment, politicians Richard had donated to over the years. I counted 14 people who congratulated Victoria before Richard's casket even reached the hearse. 14. Madame CEO, one board member murmured, squeezing her elbow like she'd just won an award. She gave them that corporate smile she reserves for investor calls. Warm, but not too warm. Confident, but not cocky. Perfectly rehearsed. My name wasn't in the program. My seat wasn't in the front row. That space was for Victoria, Brandon, and the board chairman. I sat 3 rows back next to Emily, who kept squeezing my hand. At 19, she could read the room better than her brother ever would. Victoria delivered the eulogy. She talked about legacy, vision, the future of Hartley Medical Systems. She never once mentioned that I'd saved the company, not the 70-hour weeks, not the emergency flight to Munich at 2 a.m. to lock down a supplier, not the production line I personally redesigned to cut costs without sacrificing quality. Just legacy, vision, future. When they lowered the casket, people formed a receiving line. Victoria stood in the middle, accepting condolences like she was accepting a title deed, an inheritance she believed was already hers. Brandon stood beside her, the golden son, shaking hands with the same board members who'd conveniently forgotten my existence. Emily stayed with me. "Dad," she whispered, "why aren't you up there?" "Because I wasn't invited," I said. She looked at me with those sharp eyes that miss nothing. "What's going on?" "Nothing yet," I told her, "but it will." The unraveling started before Richard's body was even cold. Monday morning, I tried logging into my email. Invalid password. I reset it. Standard IT procedure. By noon, my access to the financial databases was revoked. By Tuesday, meetings I'd scheduled the week before were quietly canceled and rescheduled without looping me in. Email threads I'd started no longer had me copied. Wednesday morning, I drove to Hartley Medical's headquarters in Foster City, just like I had for 23 years. My keycard worked at the main entrance, but when I tried the executive floor, the reader flashed red. Denied. Janet, the security supervisor, looked mortified. She'd been there since 1998. "Mr. Stratton, I'm sorry, but your executive credentials are under review. It says it's temporary, just during the transition. Transition to what? I asked. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I don't have details, sir, but I can escort you upstairs if you'd like. I shouldn't have needed an escort in my own building, but I took it. Janet walked me to the elevator, swiped her card, hit 5. The ride up was silent except for the mechanical hum. When the doors opened, I looked down the hallway at my office, the one I'd occupied since 2004. The door was open. 2 people were inside, packing files into boxes. I went straight to the conference room, where our weekly operations meeting should have been in progress. Through the glass wall, I saw Victoria at the head of the table, my seat. Brandon sat to her right, taking notes. 8 other executives filled the remaining chairs. My chair was gone. They hadn't just taken my place, they'd removed the actual chair. Victoria saw me through the glass, our eyes locked for maybe 3 seconds. Then she turned away and continued her presentation, gesturing at a slide I'd created last month, showing Q4 projections. She kept talking. No one acknowledged me. I stood there long enough to feel ridiculous, then turned and walked back to my office. The 2 people boxing up my files froze when I stepped inside. One was from HR, a kid named Derek, hired 6 months ago. The other was Victoria's assistant, Melissa. "Mr. Stratton," Derek stammered, "we're just consolidating some duplicate files for the transition." "Those aren't duplicates," I said quietly. "Those are originals, the supplier contracts from 2007 to 2012. The patent applications I'd filed myself, my research notes." "Mrs. Stratton requested all executive materials be centralized," Derek said. "Not Victoria, Mrs. Stratton," Melissa added, like it was a title I'd somehow lost. I picked up a framed photo from my desk, Emily's high school graduation 4 years earlier. She was in her blue gown, holding her diploma, smiling at something I'd said just before the picture was taken. I slipped it into my briefcase. "You can keep the rest," I told them. By Thursday, they'd reassign my parking space. I'd had the same spot for 15 years, 3rd row, space 47, right by the south entrance. That morning, there was a Honda Civic sitting in it, and a new sign on the post, "Reserved, Mrs. Stratton." My new spot was on the 5th level of the parking garage, the one where the fluorescent lights flickered and the elevator was perpetually out of order. I didn't say a word. I parked, walked down 5 flights of stairs, and went to work. Friday morning, security couldn't even find my badge in the system. "I'm sorry, Mr. Stratton," the guard said, a younger guy, someone who didn't know who I was. "You'll need to sign in as a visitor." So I did. I wrote my name on a clipboard like any stranger walking into the company I'd rescued. Monday arrived with the kind of heavy quiet that comes before a storm. I put on a suit, the charcoal Tom Ford Victoria had given me for our 20th anniversary, back when she still pretended we were partners. I got to Hartley Medical at 8:45 a.m., signed in as a visitor for the 5th day in a row, and took the elevator to the executive floor. The boardroom was already full. Through the glass walls, I could see the entire board of directors seated around the table. 9 of them. Victoria sat at the head. Brandon was on her right. The chair directly opposite her, my old seat during board meetings, was conspicuously vacant. At 9:03 a.m., Victoria's assistant opened the door. "Mr. Stratton, they're ready for you." I walked in. No one stood. No one offered a handshake. Thomas Reeves, the board chair, a man I'd played golf with for 15 years, gestured toward the empty chair. "James, please, have a seat," he said. His tone had that polished softness people use when they're about to stab you politely. I sat and took in the room. Half the people at that table were there because I'd recommended them. Our CFO, Patricia Vaughn, wouldn't look at me. The head of R&D, a man I'd personally mentored, stared at his tablet like it held the cure for cancer. "James," Thomas began, "we appreciate everything you've done for Hartley Medical over the years. Your technical expertise has been invaluable." Invaluable, past tense, always a clue. "However," he continued, "given the recent organizational restructuring and strategic realignment under Victoria's leadership, the board has made the difficult decision to terminate your position. Effective immediately." The room went completely still. I counted to 5 in my head. Let the silence stretch. Then I smiled. Not broadly. Just enough to make Thomas's left eye twitch. "Of course," I said. "I completely understand." Victoria's expression flickered for a split second. This wasn't the reaction she'd rehearsed for. She'd been expecting anger, begging maybe. Certainly not calm acceptance. Your severance package is quite generous, Patricia cut in quickly, sliding a folder across the table toward me. 6 months' salary, continued health benefits for 1 year, and full vesting of your retirement account. I didn't even touch the folder. That's very considerate, I said. We'll need your building access credentials and any company property returned by the end of business today, Thomas added. Absolutely, I replied. I'll have everything down to security by noon. Brandon shifted in his chair. He looked uneasy, like he was watching a play in a language he didn't fully understand. Good, I thought. He should be uncomfortable. Is there anything you'd like to say? Victoria asked. CEO voice. Cool, measured, perfectly in control. I rose slowly and buttoned my jacket. Just one thing, I said. They all leaned in slightly, waiting. Thank you for the opportunity, I said. It's been educational. I walked out before anyone could answer. I didn't slam the door. I didn't even glance back. I just pressed the elevator button, rode down to the lobby, and headed for my car. My phone buzzed. A text from Emily. Dad, Brandon just texted me. They fired you. Are you okay? I typed back, I'm fine. Monday will be interesting. Her reply came almost instantly. What happens Monday? Justice, I wrote. But first, I needed to pack my office. I went back upstairs and gathered my things one by one. Emily's photo. A paperweight Douglas had given me. A polished piece of titanium from our first successful prototype. My MIT diploma. That was about it. Nothing else in that room truly belonged to me anymore. The office felt smaller, emptier, or maybe I'd simply outgrown it. By 11:47 a.m., I was done. I left my access badge on the desk, along with the company laptop and my parking pass. Then I walked out carrying a single cardboard box. Martha, the receptionist, had tears in her eyes. Mr. Stratton, this isn't right, she said. It's exactly right, I told her. Trust me. The house was unnervingly quiet when I got home. Victoria's Mercedes wasn't in the driveway. She was still at the office, most likely celebrating. But her presence was everywhere. Fresh flowers in the foyer, the kind she only bought for special occasions. A bottle of Macallan 25 on the bar cart, half empty, Richard's favorite scotch. She'd been toasting her win. I walked through the house we'd bought in 2005, a 4,000-square-foot place in Atherton backing onto a nature preserve. We'd held dozens of company dinners here. Every Thanksgiving, Richard had sat in the den with a bourbon in hand, telling stories about the early days of Hartley Medical. It was in that same den that I found her. Victoria was sitting in my leather armchair, the one I'd picked up at an estate sale in 2008, the one she'd always complained was too masculine for the room. In 17 years, she had never sat in it, not once. Now she lounged there like she owned the place, a crystal tumbler in her hand, 2 fingers of Macallan resting in the bottom. Her shoes were off, her stockinged feet tucked beneath her. She looked relaxed, entitled, victorious. This is better for both of us, Victoria said, not even bothering to look up. She swirled the scotch lazily. You'll be happier outside the corporate structure. You were never really management material. I set the cardboard box down by the stairs. Is that right? I asked. You're brilliant technically, she went on, but you lack vision. Strategy. My father saw it too. Near the end, he knew the company needed someone who could think big picture. Your father told you that? I asked. He didn't have to, she said. I could see it. The way he started consulting me more, bringing me into board discussions. He was preparing me to lead. I walked toward the stairs, stopped halfway up, and turned just enough to see her over my shoulder. Did you ever wonder why he gave me that office safe? I asked. Her hand froze mid-swirl over the glass. What safe? She asked. The one in my office. The biometric safe, keyed to my thumbprint, I said. Your father had it installed himself in 2012. Said it was for important documents. Her expression shifted, not full-on panic, but close. What documents? Victoria asked. The ones you should have read before you fired me, I said. I continued up the stairs, leaving her in my chair with her dead father's scotch. Drunk on power she believed belonged to her. Behind me, I heard the glass set down with a soft clink, heard her stand, her stockings whispering across the hardwood. James, she called up the stairs. What documents? I didn't answer. I walked into my study, closed the door, and called Arthur Hastings, Richard's personal attorney, the man who drafted the documents Victoria didn't even know existed. Arthur, I said when he picked up, it's time. Monday, he asked. Monday, I confirmed. 9 a.m. sharp. Sunday evening, I met Arthur at his private office in Palo Alto. The building was one of those restored Victorians wedged between glass towers and tech startups, easy to overlook if you didn't know what you were searching for. A small brass plate by the door read, Hastings and Associates Estate Law, in letters so discreet they practically repelled walk-ins. Arthur had been Richard's personal attorney for 43 years. He'd handled everything, wills, trusts, and the ugly divorce from his first wife back in the 80s. When Richard called someone family, it meant something. Arthur was family. He was already waiting in his office when I arrived, 71, silver hair, wire-rimmed glasses, wearing a cardigan that had probably been top of the line in 1987. A battered leather briefcase rested on his desk like a loyal dog. James, Arthur said, standing to shake my hand. His grip was firm, unshaken. I've been expecting this call for 6 years. Richard told you it would come? I asked. He told me exactly when it would come, Arthur replied. He said, when I'm dead and Victoria fires him, that's when you open the vault. He unlocked the briefcase and took out a thick leather binder, the kind with brass corners and an old-fashioned clasp. Then he produced a sealed envelope, red wax pressed with my initials. He slid both items across the desk. Everything's intact, he said. I reviewed it again on Friday. Not a single document has been challenged or superseded. Richard was meticulous. I opened the binder. Inside were dozens of documents, neatly organized with colored tabs, transfer agreements, equity purchase contracts, some going back to 2007, others much more recent, all signed, all notarized, all witnessed. The foundational equity transfer, Arthur said, tapping the first section. When Hartley Medical needed capital in 2007, you provided $12 million. Richard structured it as a stock purchase, not a loan. 29% equity with voting rights. I remembered. Victoria had been pregnant with Emily. We'd used my signing bonus from a patent sale, plus the money I'd been saving for a house. Richard had looked me in the eye and said, "This makes you family in the only way that matters." Over the next 16 years, Arthur continued, you acquired additional shares through various vehicles, silent partnerships, custodial accounts, trust structures, all authorized by Richard, all documented. He flipped to another tab, the marital equity clause. When you married Victoria in 2001, Richard created a spousal protection trust. In the event the marriage ended, or there was proven corporate malfeasance that harmed family interests, certain shares would automatically transfer to the wronged party. How many shares in total? I asked. Arthur pulled out a spreadsheet and slid it toward me. Rows of numbers, percentages, dates, signatures. 62%, he said. You control 62% of Hartley Medical Systems voting shares. The room went silent, except for the soft ticking of an antique clock on the shelf, steady as a heartbeat. She doesn't know, I said. Nobody knows, Arthur confirmed, except you, me, and the trustee at Wells Fargo, who manages the holding accounts. Richard wanted it that way. He called it his insurance policy. Insurance against what? Against his daughter becoming someone he didn't recognize, Arthur said quietly. He loved Victoria, but he saw where she was heading, ambition without substance, entitlement without effort. He told me once, if she tries to erase James, she's erasing the wrong man. I picked up the sealed envelope and broke the wax. Inside was a single sheet of Richard's personal stationery, his handwriting in blue ink. James, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and my daughter has made a terrible mistake. I'm sorry I couldn't fix her. I tried. What I could fix was the company. It's yours now. Don't let her destroy what we built. Richard. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it back into the envelope. What's the plan? Arthur asked. Tomorrow morning, we file a notice of extraordinary shareholder meeting, I said. Clause 12, C, of the corporate bylaws. It requires an immediate board assembly when the majority shareholder demands a restructuring review. They'll fight it, Arthur warned. Let them, I said. The documents are airtight. You made sure of that. Arthur smiled, an actual unguarded smile, the first I'd seen from him. Your father-in-law didn't hire me for my personality, he said. He hired me because I don't lose. We spent the next 2 hours combing through every document, every signature, every contingency. By the time I left, it was after midnight. The city lights outside flickered like a circuit board powering up for war. I texted Emily. Tomorrow changes everything. She responded almost immediately. Good. Mom's been unbearable since the funeral. She's about to get worse, I typed. Then she's about to get quiet. At exactly 9:01 a.m. Monday morning, the email hit every board member's inbox at the same time. Subject line: Notice of Extraordinary Shareholder Meeting. Clause 12, C. I didn't see their faces when it landed, but Arthur had already walked me through how it would go. First, confusion, then a second, slower read, and then the realization that the email was a scalpel aimed directly at them, to the Board of Directors of Hartley Medical Systems. Per Clause 12C of the Corporate Bylaws, as amended 2012, the undersigned majority shareholder hereby demands an extraordinary meeting to address the following: immediate dissolution of current executive appointments, review of all equity distributions and voting rights, restructuring of board composition and leadership. Meeting to be convened today, Monday, December 9th, 12 p.m., Executive Boardroom. Attendance is mandatory per shareholder rights. Regards, James Stratton. Majority shareholder, Hartley Medical Systems. The attachments were worse. 12 PDF files, each one perfectly legal and entirely mine. Stock transfer agreements, equity purchase contracts, trust documentation, proving my 62% controlling stake. Notarized, witnessed, dated, airtight. At 9:07, my phone started ringing. Victoria. I let it ring out. At 9:12, Thomas Reeves called, straight to voicemail. At 9:18, a text from Patricia Vaughn. James, we need to talk. This can't be legitimate, I replied. See you at noon. At 9:23, Arthur called. The CFO just contacted me, demanding verification, he said. I sent her the Wells Fargo trust statements and the original 2007 transfer agreements. She hang up on you? I asked. She hung up without saying goodbye, he said. How long until Victoria calls you? She already has, 3 times. I didn't answer. At 9:31, Emily called. Dad, Brandon just showed up at my apartment, she said. He's freaking out. Says you're trying to steal the company. I'm not stealing anything, I said. I'm taking back what's mine. He says Mom's having a breakdown, Emily went on. She's throwing things in her office. Emily, I need you to trust me. Can you do that? There was a brief pause then. I've always trusted you, Dad. You're the only one who's never lied to me. At 10:15, bonded couriers arrived at Hartley Medical Headquarters with hard copies of the notice. Black folders, premium stock paper. The kind that silently announces, this is not up for negotiation. One for each board member, hand-delivered, signature required. Martha, the receptionist, told me later that Victoria intercepted her folder right there in the lobby. She opened it beside the artificial ficus, read the first page, then the second. Her face shifted from confusion to a cold, dawning recognition. Is this legal? Victoria demanded, as if Martha would know. Martha shrugged. Ma'am, I just answer the phones. At 11:03, Victoria's attorney called Arthur, demanding to know where the shares had come from, who authorized the transfers, whether any procedures had been violated. Arthur's response was a masterclass in legal minimalism. Every document was executed personally by Richard Hartley, filed with the appropriate regulatory bodies, and held in trust in accordance with California corporate law. If you'd like to challenge their validity, I'll see you in court. Otherwise, see you at noon. At 11:47, I walked into Hartley Medical, through the front doors, no badge this time. Martha's eyes went wide. Mr. Stratton, she whispered, should I? No visitor badge today, Martha, I said. Not anymore. I took the elevator to the 5th floor. The executive boardroom doors were closed, but through the frosted glass I could see silhouettes shifting inside. All of them were there, every board member. Victoria at the head of the table, phone to her ear, gesturing wildly. I checked my watch. 11:53. At exactly 12 o'clock noon, I opened the doors and walked in. The room went dead silent. 12 people, one empty chair at the head of the table where Victoria was standing, and me in the doorway. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. This meeting violates every corporate governance protocol, Victoria snapped, her tone sharp but still trying to sound in control. I'm still the acting CEO. No vote can proceed without proper notice and board approval. At the far end of the table sat Margaret Vickers, the trust administrator Richard had hired in 2010. 67, silver hair pulled back in a tight knot, reading glasses hanging from a chain. She'd managed the Hartley family trust for 14 years and had absolutely no patience for theatrics. He holds controlling interest, Margaret said, not even glancing up from the papers in front of her. Per Clause 12, C, this meeting is valid. Victoria's hands tightened on the back of her chair. That's impossible. The ownership structure is a matter of public record with the SEC. James Stratton owns 62% of the voting shares, Margaret said, cutting her off. He has since 2019, when the final trust transfer executed. You own 18% through inheritance. Your son Brandon owns 6%, gifted by his grandfather. Emily owns 7%. The remaining 7% is distributed among non-voting preferred shareholders. Brandon went pale. He'd been typing on his tablet, but his hand froze mid-word. Thomas cleared his throat. James, surely we can discuss this privately. Come to some sort of arrangement? All in favor of the motion to restructure current executive leadership, Margaret said, talking right over him. In accordance with majority shareholder authority, please indicate now. No one moved. The silence stretched, tight as a wire. This is a vote, Margaret continued. Raise your hand if you support the restructuring motion. Patricia raised her hand first, then the head of R&D, then 3 more, one after another. Hands kept going up. Even Thomas, after a long, uncomfortable pause, lifted his. Victoria's mouth fell open slightly, but no words came out. She looked around at the same people who had toasted her appointment just 6 days earlier. Every single one of them had their hand in the air. Unanimous, Margaret said, making a note. The motion carries. Effective immediately, Victoria Stratton is removed from the position of CEO. All interim executive appointments are revoked pending review. This is insane, Victoria finally managed. You can't just... I can, I said quietly. And I did. Brandon shot to his feet, his chair scraping across the floor. Dad, what are you doing? What your grandfather wanted me to do, I said. What I should have done years ago. You don't even work here anymore, he said. I never stopped working here, I corrected her. I just stopped pretending you were the one in charge. Margaret slid a folder across the table toward me. Sign here, Mr. Stratton. These documents formalize your position as chairman and CEO. I walked to the head of the table and took the pen she offered. I signed my name on 3 different pages. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the pen scratching across thick, expensive paper, like a judge's gavel delivered in ink. When I looked up, Victoria was staring at me with a look I'd never seen on her face before. Not anger exactly. More like stunned disbelief, like she'd just discovered the laws of physics didn't apply the way she thought they did. The board will reconvene Wednesday at 9 a.m., I said. Patricia, I need a full financial review by tomorrow. Thomas, I want an audit of the last 6 months of executive decisions. Everyone else, your positions remain for now, pending performance review. I turned to Victoria. You're welcome to attend Wednesday's meeting as a minority shareholder, but you'll be in the gallery, not at the table. Brandon grabbed her arm. Mom, let's go. Please. For a second, I thought she might blow up, argue, put on a show. Instead, she picked up her phone and portfolio, straightened her jacket, and started toward the door. She stopped beside me, close enough for me to catch her perfume, the same one she'd worn on our wedding day. You planned this, she whispered. All of it? No, I said. Your father planned it. I just executed. She left without another word, Brandon trailing after her like a shadow. Through the glass wall, I watched them walk to the elevator. Victoria's posture was perfect, chin high, every inch the CEO she'd been pretending to be. The doors closed, and she was gone. By 4 p.m., the story had already leaked. Someone on the board, my bet was on Patricia, who had never been fond of Victoria, had tipped off a business reporter at the San Francisco Chronicle. The headline went live at 4:17. Hartley Medical CEO, ousted in shareholder coup. Founder's son-in-law takes control. The article was surprisingly accurate. It mentioned the emergency board meeting, my 62% ownership stake, and Victoria's removal. What made it explode was the last paragraph. A quote from an unnamed source calling Victoria's decision to fire me 5 days earlier the most expensive mistake in Bay Area corporate history. By 4:30, TechCrunch and Business Insider had picked it up. By 5 o'clock, it was trending on LinkedIn. Someone dug up our wedding photo, Victoria in the $18,000 dress she'd insisted on, me in a rented tux that never quite fit, with the caption, "Guess who really married into money?" My phone started lighting up around 5:15. Texts from former colleagues, investors, people I hadn't heard from in years. Most were congratulating me. A few were clearly fishing for intel. Emily called at 5:42. "Dad, it's everywhere," she said. "Brandon's losing it. Mom locked herself in her office and won't talk to anyone. How are you?" "I should be asking you that," I said. "I'm good," Emily replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Actually, I'm really good. Grandpa always said you were the smartest person in the room. Guess he wasn't exaggerating." "Your mother made her choice," I began, but Emily cut me off. "I made mine too," she said. "I'm proud of you, Dad." That hit harder than I expected. "Thank you, sweetheart." "There's something you should know," Emily added. "Brandon showed me a memo Mom wrote 6 months ago. She was planning to force you out even before Grandpa died. She had the whole strategy laid out." 6 months. While Richard was still alive, still fighting cancer, Victoria had been mapping out my removal. "Where did Brandon find the memo?" I asked. "In Mom's office after the board meeting," Emily said. "He's really shaken. Dad, I think he's finally starting to see who she really is." At 6:03, Victoria's attorney, a sharp, polished predator named Preston Hale, sent Arthur a cease and desist letter demanding we retract all slanderous claims and reinstate Victoria as CEO. Arthur replied with a one-sentence email, "See you in court, counselor. Bring documentation." The real fallout started hitting around 7 p.m. A tech blogger who specialized in corporate drama somehow got hold of an internal email Victoria had sent 3 months earlier. Subject line, "Operational Efficiency Review." In it, she referred to me as legacy overhead and wrote that while my technical contributions were historically significant, they no longer aligned with her strategic vision. Legacy overhead. The man who'd saved the company was overhead. The blogger ran it under the headline, "How to Insult Your Majority Shareholder, a Case Study in Corporate Stupidity." It got worse. At 7:34, someone leaked audio from the board meeting where Victoria had fired me. I don't know who recorded it, probably a phone left face down on the table, but the sound was crystal clear. Victoria's voice, cold, polished, corporate. "We're terminating your position effective immediately." Then mine, calm, almost amused. "Of course, I understand completely. Monday will be interesting." That clip blew up. By 8 p.m., it had 500,000 views on Twitter. People were turning it into a meme. "Monday will be interesting" instantly became shorthand for unexpected revenge. At 8:47, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost let it go, but something made me pick up. "Mr. Stratton," a woman's voice said, professional but warm. "This is Jennifer Cole from 60 Minutes. We'd love to talk to you about doing a segment on corporate governance and family businesses. Would you be interested?" "Not at this time," I said, "but thank you. If you change your mind—" "I won't," I said, and hung up. The house was quiet when I got home at 9:30. Victoria's car was gone. Her closet was half empty. She'd taken clothes, toiletries, her jewelry box, and left everything else behind. There was a note on the kitchen counter, her handwriting sharp and angry. "This isn't over." I crumpled it and tossed it in the trash. My phone buzzed. "Emily, Mom's at the Four Seasons. Brandon's with her. I'm staying at Sarah's tonight. Are you okay?" I texted back, "I'm fine. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be busy." I poured myself 2 fingers of the Macallan, the same bottle Victoria had been drinking from, and sat down in my chair, in my house, in my company. The silence felt like victory. Wednesday's board meeting started at 9 a.m. Sharp. I arrived 15 minutes early, carrying Richard's old leather portfolio, the one he'd used for 40 years, the corners worn smooth, his initials in gold faded to a dull bronze. The boardroom felt different now. My name was on the placard, Chairman and CEO. The chair at the head of the table was mine, not because I'd stolen it, but because of paperwork that predated Victoria's ambitions. Patricia had the financial review ready. She slid it across the table as the board members filed in. Same 9 people as Monday, but the energy had shifted. They all knew exactly who was in charge now. Before we start, I said, I want to address the pension fund. The room went still. Patricia's jaw tightened. Over the past 8 months, I continued, $4.2 million was transferred out of the Employee Retirement Fund into a discretionary account labeled Executive Operational Flexibility. Care to explain that, Patricia? She cleared her throat. Those transfers were authorized by the acting CEO as short-term loans to cover cash flow gaps during the transition. Victoria assured me the funds would be replaced within 60 days. It's been 8 months, I said. Where's the money? Patricia pulled another folder from her stack and pushed it toward me. Bank statements, wire transfers, a neat paper trail leading exactly where I suspected it would. Victoria had used pension money to pay consulting firms that didn't exist, shell companies, a personal slush fund. This is embezzlement, Thomas Reeves said quietly. This is federal fraud, I corrected, and anyone in this room who knew about it carries liability. I didn't know, Patricia said quickly. I only discovered it Monday when I started the audit. I was going to report it. Were you? I asked. Or were we going to manage optics like you did with the other irregularities? Her face went white. I'm not, I said. You're suspended, effective immediately, pending a full investigation. If you cooperated with Victoria's scheme, even by looking the other way, you're done. I scanned the room. Anyone else want to confess before the SEC gets here? Silence. Good. Here's what happens next. Every dollar taken from that pension fund gets restored by the end of the week. I'll cover it personally if I have to. But those 300 employees get their retirement back. Second, we're implementing new financial controls. No transfer over $50,000 without dual authorization. Third, Arthur Hastings will conduct a full forensic audit covering the last 2 years. If he finds more rot, heads will roll. The meeting went on for another 90 minutes. We restructured executive compensation, froze all consulting contracts pending review, and put in place oversight mechanisms that should have been there a decade ago. By the end, the board looked wrung out. One more thing, I said, as people started gathering their papers. Brandon Stratton is terminated from his role in business development. He voted to fire me knowing I was the majority shareholder. That's either incompetence or complicity. Either way, he's out. No one objected. At 11:30, my phone buzzed. Emily again. Dad, Brandon just came to my apartment. He's a mess, crying. Says he didn't know. Mom told him you were just an employee. What do? I typed back. He's your brother. Help him if you want, but he made his choice. He'll have to live with it. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. Finally, he says he wants to apologize to you. Tell him I'm at the office, I wrote. If he wants to talk, he knows where to find me. Brandon showed up at 2:15. Martha called from reception. Mr. Stratton, your son is here. Should I send him up? Give me 5 minutes, I said. Then yes. I took my place behind Richard's old desk, now my desk, and waited. When Brandon came in, he looked wrecked. Red eyes, rumpled shirt, shoulders sagging like someone had taken the spine out of him. Dad, he said, hovering in the doorway, like he wasn't sure he was allowed to step inside. Sit, I said, not unkindly. He sat, hands clasped between his knees, staring at the floor. I didn't know, Brandon said quietly. About the shares, about Grandpa's plan, any of it. Mom told me you were just technical staff, that Grandpa was grooming me to take over. She said firing you was necessary for the company's future. And you believed her? I asked. She's my mother, he said, looking up. Why wouldn't I? Because you're 22, not 12, I said. Because you've worked here for 3 years and you've seen how this company actually runs. You were in those meetings when I laid out the R&D strategy, when I negotiated with suppliers, When I salvaged contracts your mother was about to lose. You saw all of it, Brandon. You just chose not to see. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't put the pension money back, I said. Sorry doesn't erase the fact that you voted to fire your own father. Sorry is just what people say when the consequences finally show up. I know, he whispered. I leaned back in my chair and really looked at my son. He looked so much like Victoria, the same bone structure, the same posture, the same practiced way of holding himself. But there was something of Richard in him too. Maybe, just maybe, something still worth salvaging. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You're fired from Hartley Medical. That's not up for discussion. What you do after this is your choice. You can run back to your mother, let her paint me as the villain, and spend the rest of your life blaming me for wrecking her coronation. Or you can grow up, learn from this, and decide what kind of man you actually want to be. What would Grandpa want me to do? Brandon asked. Your grandfather would tell you that character isn't inherited, I said. It's built, one decision at a time, starting with whether you walk out of here blaming everyone else or accepting that you screwed up. Brandon rose slowly. Can I call you sometime? Not about work, just as my dad? You've always been able to do that, I said. You just have to decide if you want to. He nodded and turned toward the door, then stopped halfway. Mom's planning something, he said. I don't know what, but she's been on the phone with lawyers all week. She told Tyler you haven't really won yet. Thanks for the warning, I said. After he left, I sat alone in the quiet office. Outside, the sun was setting over Foster City, streaking the sky in orange and violet. Richard used to say sunset was the best time to make decisions, when the noise of the day faded and your thoughts finally came into focus. My phone buzzed, a text from Arthur. Victoria's attorney filed an injunction to freeze all corporate decisions pending an ownership dispute. Judge tossed it, said the paperwork is too solid to challenge. She's out of moves. I didn't reply. I just watched the sun drop below the horizon and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. The legacy dinner was my idea. Not a celebration, Richard would have hated that, but a quiet gathering of the people who had actually built Hartley Medical before it became a brand. Back when it was just an idea in a workshop in San Mateo. We hosted it at the Rosewood Hotel in Menlo Park in a private dining room. 60 people, engineers from the first production line, the sales rep who'd landed our first hospital contract in 1984, the regulatory specialist who'd gotten our imaging system, FDA, cleared when everyone said it was impossible. Richard's original investors, the ones who believed in him when medical equipment meant bedpans and thermometers, not life-saving diagnostic machines. I didn't invite Victoria. She wasn't on the list because she'd never been part of the building, only the taking. The room was warm and understated. A string quartet played something classical but not pretentious. Linen tablecloths, simple floral centerpieces, the kind of evening Richard would have approved of. No press, no cameras, no performance. Just the right people saying the right things. Around 8:30, after dinner and before dessert, I stood to speak. The room quieted. Richard Hartley built something that mattered, I said. Not just because it made money, though it did, but because it solved real problems. When a hospital in Des Moines needed imaging equipment they could actually afford, Richard made it affordable. When a clinic in rural Montana needed parts, he made sure they got them. He didn't build this company for a legacy. He built it because people needed what we made. I looked around, gray hair, lined faces, people who remembered when a good month meant shipping 5 units instead of 500. Some people inherit titles, I went on. Others inherit responsibility. Richard knew the difference. That's why he trusted this company to people who understand what building really is. Not the marketing, not the branding, not the quarterly calls, the work, the actual work. The applause that followed was soft but sincere. These weren't people who clapped for a show. They clapped for truth. After the speech, I moved through the room, shaking hands, listening to stories about Richard I'd never heard before. An engineer remembered Richard personally rewiring a prototype at 2 a.m. because the contractor had botched it. An accountant recalled Richard taking a pay cut during a recession, so assembly line workers wouldn't lose their jobs. Your father-in-law was the real deal, one of the original investors told me. A rare breed, cared more about the work than the credit. I'm glad he trusted you with this." "So am I said. At 9:40, I stepped outside for some air. The hotel garden was quiet except for the fountain and the distant murmur of traffic from 101. I loosened my tie and breathed in the cool November air. "Dad." I turned. Emily stood in the doorway, backlit by the warm light from inside. "I thought you were at school," I said. "I drove down," she said, crossing the patio to me. "No way I was missing this. Grandpa would have wanted me here." We stood side by side in the garden, watching the fountain cycle the same water in endless loops. "Mom called me today," Emily said. "She wanted me to convince you to settle. Said she'd drop all the legal challenges if you gave her a board seat in a consulting role." "What did you tell her?" I asked. "I told her Grandpa didn't leave her the company because she never learned how to build, only how to take," Emily said. Then I hung up. I put an arm around her shoulders. "That was harsh." "That was honest," she corrected. "There's a difference." Inside, the quartet started playing again. Someone laughed, the sound drifting through the open door. "What happens now?" Emily asked. "With the company, with Mom, with everything?" "Now we build," I said. "Same as always. We make equipment that works. We pay our people fairly. We protect the pension fund. And we remember why Richard started all this in the first place." "And Mom?" she asked. "Your mother owns 18% of a company she tried to steal," I said. "She'll get dividends. She'll show up at shareholder meetings. She'll live comfortably. But she will never run Hartley Medical. That ship sailed the day she fired me." "Good," Emily said quietly. We walked back inside together. The evening wound down just after 11 o'clock. People drifted out in pairs and small groups, promising to keep in touch, to remember the early days, to honor what Richard had built. By 11:30, it was just me and Arthur sitting in the now empty dining room, nursing cold coffee and the simple satisfaction of a job done right. "Richard would be proud," Arthur said. "Richard made this possible," I replied. "I just followed his instructions." "You did more than that," Arthur said. "You protected what he built. That counts for something." 8 months later, Hartley Medical announced the most profitable quarter in its history. We'd restored the pension fund, renegotiated supplier contracts, and signed 2 major hospital networks. Brandon had enrolled in a graduate program at Berkeley, studying business ethics of all things. He called every Sunday. We were working on it. Victoria had settled in Santa Barbara, consulting for medical startups under her maiden name, Hartley Consulting. She tried to craft a legacy of her own, separate from the company she'd lost. I heard she was moderately successful. I didn't pay much attention. Emily finished her journalism degree and joined our communications department, not because I handed her a job, but because she earned it. Richard would have liked that. Sometimes, late at night, I'd sit in the chair Richard used to favor in the corner of my office and think about the choice he'd made all those years ago, trusting me with his company instead of his daughter, creating protections she never even knew existed, designing a future where competence weighed more than blood. He'd seen something in me I hadn't seen in myself, or maybe he'd just seen Victoria clearly and made the only choice that made sense. Either way, Hartley Medical Systems survived, not because of a last name, or a legacy speech, or an inheritance, because of the work, the actual work. And that, I thought, was exactly how Richard would have wanted it.